That morning in September, 3 gold-wrapped packages waited for her on the Carrara marble table in the living room. A strand of Mikimoto pearls she would never wear, a blood-red Valentino dress that screamed guilt, and a card in his rushed handwriting to the most beautiful woman in San Francisco. If only he knew that a few hours later she would learn the name of the woman who truly owned that title in his mind. Sarah. And if only Sarah knew that the decorative wife she mocked so easily was about to become the most feared and most admired woman in the Bay Area's luxury business circles. But right then, Karen Lewis was still only porcelain in a gilded cage, counting days inside a mansion that felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum for dead dreams. She didn't know it yet. The worst night of her life would also be the first night she actually began to exist. There's a certain kind of cold that doesn't come from weather. It comes from silence, polished, expensive, carefully maintained silence, the kind that settles into the corners of a beautiful house and waits there patient like dust you can't see until the light hits it just right. On nights like that, you can hear a clock breathe, you can hear your own thoughts move. And if you listen long enough, you start to realize the danger isn't what's outside the door. It's what's already inside the room with you. Because some lives don't fall apart loudly. They unravel in whispers. And once the thread starts slipping, you don't always notice until your hands are empty. The Lewis estate in Atherton woke under the first weak rays of morning, its tall windows catching the light like cut glass. Inside the primary bedroom, Karen opened her eyes slowly. Honey brown hair spread across silk pillowcases like spilled sunlight. At 28, she still carried the calm, effortless beauty that had once stopped Jason Lewis in his tracks 10 years earlier, back when they were college kids with cheap coffee, big plans, and a future that felt close enough to touch. Now the future felt like something she'd dreamed and forgotten. The side of the bed where her husband should have been was cold, untouched, the sheets weren't even wrinkled. Another night, another empty space. Karen exhaled, the sound thin in the quiet, and rose with the careful slowness of someone trying not to disturb a house that already didn't want her there. She walked to the panoramic window overlooking the yard. Perfect grass. Trimmed hedges, a line of rose bushes she had planted herself in the first years of the marriage, back when she believed this house would be a cradle for laughter for children, for a life that felt real. "Good morning, Mrs. Lewis," said Harda the housekeeper, stepping into the doorway with a soft, practiced grace. Marta was in her 60s, steady as a metronome, and in 5 years she'd become more than staff. She was Karen's only witness, her only confidant in a palace that sometimes felt like a luxury prison. "Morning, Marta." Karen paused, though she already knew the answer. Did Jason come home at all? Marta's eyes held that familiar compassion before she spoke. "No, honey." A beat. "But he left word. He'll be back late this afternoon. He said he has an important meeting." Marta hesitated as if she could see the bruise forming beneath the words. "And there were deliveries for you. They're in the living room." Karen descended the Carrara marble staircase barefoot, her steps silent against the cold stone. The living room was curated perfection, Italian furniture, abstract canvases, a scent of bergamot that never quite masked the emptiness. On the marble table, 3 packages sat like offerings. She recognized the pattern immediately. Jason's apologies never came with words. They came with receipts. The first box held Mikimoto pearls, delicate, expensive, pointless. The second held the Valentino dress, blood red, the kind of color that demands attention and makes no room for modesty. The third held a card, his handwriting sharp and hurried. "To the most beautiful woman in San Francisco. See you tonight at the construction gala." Karen held the card between her fingers and felt the weight of everything he didn't say. Jason Lewis, 32, had built an empire in commercial development, turning empty lots into glass towers and million-dollar leases. In the business world, he was a visionary. In the social world, he was a man with a charming smile and just enough danger behind it to keep people watching. And to the outside world, they were perfect. He was success, she was elegance. But Karen knew appearances could be the cruelest lie. For the last 2 years, Jason had become a stranger inside his own home. He left early. He returned late when he returned at all. And when they stood beside each other, he looked through her like she was air. Their conversation shrank to logistics. Schedules, photo-op dinners, charity events, anything necessary to maintain the image of a thriving couple in a thriving world. Nothing necessary to maintain a marriage. Would you like breakfast? Marta asked gently, breaking the spell. Karen forced a small smile. No, I'm not hungry. She folded the card once, twice, as if making it smaller could make it hurt less. I think I'll go outside. Just the garden. The garden had been her refuge since they moved to Atherton. Between the roses and jasmine, she'd built a small world where she could still feel alive, where something could grow under her hands. She knelt beside a bed of lavender, letting damp earth press into her fingertips. There was something almost holy about caring for something that listened. Plants didn't pretend. They didn't smile at parties and disappear afterward. They just grew, or they didn't. And somehow that honesty felt like relief. You've always been prettier in the morning. The voice behind her was familiar, warm, careful. Karen turned startled. Mark Bennett, the landscaper who maintained the property's gardens. Tall, dark hair, kind eyes. The sort of man who seemed to notice details other people stepped over. In the last few months, he'd become a constant presence. Always respectful, always professional. But sometimes his gaze lingered like he could actually see her. Mark. I didn't hear you come in. Sorry. Didn't mean to scare you. He gestured toward the greenhouse. I came to check the new orchids that arrived yesterday. Thought you might want to pick where to place them. They walked together to the glass greenhouse Jason had built as an anniversary gift 3 years ago, back when he still cared enough to learn what she loved. The greenhouse was her sanctuary, a place where she could cultivate rare things without the pressure of being rare herself. These orchids are incredible, Karen murmured, leaning close to the delicate petals. Where did you get them? A specialty grower up in Napa. Mark smiled, then almost quietly added, I thought of you when I saw them. They're rare. He cleared his throat, a faint blush at his cheeks. Like you. Karen felt heat rise in her face. It had been so long since someone offered her a compliment that wasn't obligatory. So long since anyone said something to her that didn't sound like it was meant for the room, not for her. Mark won. The electronic gate at the front of the estate opened with a mechanical hum. A black Porsche rolled up the circular driveway. Karen's stomach tightened, anxiety mixing with resignation. Jason was home early. Mark stepped back instantly, reading the tension in the air like weather. I should go. Yes. Karen swallowed. Thank you. For the orchids. They're beautiful. She walked toward the house, already putting on the invisible mask she wore for him. The cordial smile, the calm tone, the version of herself that didn't ask for too much. Jason stepped out of the car, talking on his phone suit, immaculate jaw-tight eyes alive with a spark she hadn't seen aimed at her in years. He glanced at Karen, lifted 2 fingers in a distracted wave, and kept talking, animated, intimate, effortless. Yes, sweetheart. It was perfect, he said it, voice soft in a way it never was at home. Dinner was amazing, and you looked incredible, like always. He walked toward his office without even looking at her again. The words hit Karen like blades. The tenderness in his tone, the familiarity, the way he sounded, happy with someone else. Karen stood in the entry hall and watched the man who had once promised forever disappear behind the office door. And with him went whatever thin strand of hope she'd still been holding. That evening, as she prepared for the construction gala, Karen stared at herself in the marble bathroom mirror. The red dress fit her like a confession. The pearls added a polished restraint. From the outside, she looked flawless, but her eyes beneath the makeup, beneath the perfect hair, held a quiet sorrow no amount of wealth could hide. You look beautiful, ma'am, Marta said, fastening the clasp of the necklace with careful hands. Karen's mouth curved, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thank you. It's just another performance. Marta's voice softened. Life shouldn't be a performance, honey. You deserve to be truly happy. Karen swallowed. Sometimes I think I forgot what happy feels like. When Jason appeared in the foyer in a black tuxedo, they looked like a magazine cover. He offered his arm with the automatic courtesy of a man fulfilling protocol. Karen took it with the practiced grace of an actress who has played the same role for years. But inside, she felt like porcelain, beautiful, valuable, and too fragile to be held the way she needed. The drive to the Four Seasons in San Francisco was silent, filled only by the purr of the engine and soft classical music on the radio. Karen watched the city lights multiply across the hills, each one a life, a story, a dream, a disappointment. How many other women were sitting in polished cars beside men who no longer saw them? When they arrived, Karen breathed in, steadying herself for another night of rehearsed smiles and empty conversation. She didn't know this would be the night that changed everything. The night she would finally learn the name of the woman who had taken her husband's heart. And the night she would quietly begin to find the courage she'd misplaced years ago. Some truths, no matter how brutal, are still the first step toward freedom. Inside the ballroom pulsed with high-end corporate energy. Men in tuxedos moved between clusters of investors while servers floated past with Dom Perignon and trays of impossibly perfect canapés. The decor screamed money, towering floral arrangements, custom lighting details that cost more than most people's annual salary. Karen walked beside Jason, her arm looped through his, playing the role she knew by muscle memory. Smile on cue, shake hands, compliment the right people, stand tall, look proud. But inside, she felt more disconnected from this glittering world with every step. "Jason, glad to see you," boomed Edward Stanton, a partner from one of the region's biggest development firms. His eyes flicked to Karen with a practiced charm, and the lovely Karen, always elegant. Edward Jason said, all business warmth and polished teeth. "Good to be here. This event is impressive. Congrats on the organization." As the men talked contracts and numbers, Karen's mind drifted. She watched other women in the room. Some were wives, smiling the same smile she wore. Others were executives, sharp-eyed, confident women who had built their own empires. Karen felt a quiet, aching envy for the ones who had purpose beyond being a beautiful accessory. "Excuse me," she murmured to Jason. "Restroom." He nodded without looking absorbed in another million-dollar conversation. Karen slipped down the hotel corridor, searching for a moment of air away from the bright lights and constant noise. That's when she heard it, Jason's laugh. Not the controlled, polite laugh he used in public. A real laugh. Warm, loose, full of pleasure. Her heart spiked. She followed the sound toward a smaller lounge where people gathered in more intimate groups. The door was cracked open, and what she saw on the other side stopped her like a fist to the chest. Jason leaned against the wall, relaxed in a way she hadn't seen in years. In front of him stood a woman, tall, dark-haired, stunning, laughing with him like they shared a private world. Her fingers played with his tie, intimate and possessive. A navy gown draped over her like midnight water. She was maybe 25, radiant with a confidence Karen hadn't felt in a long time. "Sarah, you're impossible," Jason said, still laughing. "I can't believe you did that during the meeting with the Germans." "Oh, please," Sarah said, adjusting his tie with an affectionate flick. The look on Schmidt's face when you told that joke was priceless. She smiled, slow and assured. "You need to loosen up more, babe. Life isn't all spreadsheets and contracts." And right here, before you hear what Karen heard next, understand something. This isn't a moment that heals. It's a moment that marks you. Because once you realize what someone says about you when you're not in the room, you can't unknow it. You can't crawl back into the version of the world where you still believed. And what comes after that isn't victory. It's a line you cross, and nothing on the other side feels the same. Karen's vision blurred at the edges. Sarah. The name hit like a bell in an empty church. Now the shadow had a face, a voice, a name she could taste like metal. Sarah looked up at Jason, fingers sliding to the back of his neck. "And your wife?" "She's here." Jason's expression barely changed. "She's here. But you know how it is." He shrugged, casual as cruelty. "Karen plays her role. I play mine. It's just about keeping up appearances." Karen's stomach dropped. "She's a good wife," Jason continued, voice flat. "Pretty, polite, perfect for events." He said it like a compliment, but it sounded like a sentence. "Between us," he added, "there hasn't been anything real in a long time." Sarah laughed softly and edged to it. "Poor thing. Must be hard being nothing but a pretty accessory." Jason's mouth curved. "You don't understand. With Karen, everything's predictable." He took a sip of his drink. "She's like expensive furniture. Beautiful, elegant, but no life of her own." Karen's legs trembled. "Furniture. Predictable. A thing." Sarah's voice dropped intimate. "When are you going to tell her?" Jason's answer came too easily. "Soon. I'm waiting for the right moment." He smiled, as if he were doing Karen a favor. "I want to do it the right way. And if she won't accept the divorce," Jason's tone turned colder, "she'll accept. Karen doesn't have a choice." He leaned closer to Sarah, confident, certain. "She has nothing besides me. No career, no money of her own, not even real friends. She'll take the settlement and move on. It's more than most women get." Karen clamped a hand over her mouth to swallow the sound that tried to escape her. That was how he saw her, a dependent, a decoration, a woman who would quietly accept being erased as long as the check cleared. Sarah laughed, not shocked, only amused. God, you can be cruel. Jason didn't deny it. Instead, he smiled like it was a shared secret. You love it. Sarah's lips brushed his neck. Maybe I do. Jason's voice lowered, and it carried something Karen hadn't heard in years, hunger. I want you, he said. I want a real life with you. He breathed the words like a promise. I want kids with you. I want to grow old with you. Kids. The word struck Karen like a shot. For years she'd asked, begged, softly. Jason always said it wasn't the right time. They needed to be more established. They should enjoy being a couple first. Now she knew the truth. He didn't want children with her. He wanted them with Sarah. Karen backed away from the door, moving like a ghost through the corridor. In the women's restroom, she locked herself into a stall and finally let the tears fall. Silent, biting her lips so no one would hear. The sandcastle of her life collapsed grain by grain until there was nothing left standing. When she could breathe again, she stared at herself in the mirror. Mascara had smudged into dark shadows beneath her eyes. With automatic hands, she retouched her makeup, fixed her hair, and inhaled until her lungs burned. She couldn't walk back into that ballroom looking shattered. She still had a role to play. Back in the main hall, she found Jason speaking animatedly to a group of investors. He turned, smiled when he saw her, the same cordial, empty smile she knew too well, and slipped an arm around her waist. Ah, there's my wife, he said, voice smooth as glass. Gentlemen, this is Karen Lewis. Karen smiled. She shook hands. She nodded in all the right places. But now every gesture felt like a lie. Every smile felt like a weight. Was she really just an accessory? A beautiful object with no substance? One of the men leaned closer to Jason. Your wife is stunning. You're a lucky man. Jason's fingers tightened lightly at Karen's waist. Thank you. I really am lucky. Karen heard the falseness behind the words like a crack in porcelain. She knew now that when he touched her, he was thinking of Sarah. When he smiled, it was courtesy. When he said he loved her on the rare occasions he still did, it was a phrase emptied of meaning. The night dragged on like a nightmare in slow motion. Karen moved through the gala like a wind-up doll, smiling, conversing, performing while her inner world burned down quietly. More than once, she spotted Sarah across the room. Always confident, always magnetic, always surrounded by men. It was impossible not to compare them. Sarah was everything Karen wasn't. Independent, professionally successful, alive. A woman with a life that didn't orbit a man. You okay, honey? Asked Mrs. Collins, the wife of one of Jason's partners. You look a little pale. I'm fine, Karen said smoothly. Just tired. Mrs. Collins sighed, sympathetic in the way people are when they mistake resignation for wisdom. These events can be exhausting. But it's the price we pay for successful husbands, isn't it? The price we pay. The phrase echoed in Karen's mind. Was that what her life was, a transaction? Safety and status in exchange for herself. When it was finally time to leave, Karen felt drained down to the bone. In the car, Jason talked about deals he'd closed, oblivious to the storm inside her. Karen answered in short, dull syllables, watching city lights smear into color through the window. You were perfect tonight, Jason said when they arrived home. A few guys commented on how beautiful you looked. Thank you, Karen murmured, slipping off heels that had carved pain into her feet. Jason loosened his bow tie. I'm going to work in the office for a bit. Don't wait up. She knew he wasn't going to work. He'd call Sarah. He'd replay their laughter. He'd plan the next meeting. Karen climbed the stairs, hung the red dress carefully in the closet, and caught her own reflection in the mirror. A woman who looked like she'd misplaced something essential, maybe her soul. In bed, in a king-sized room she shared with a man who had become a stranger. She stared at the ceiling and wondered when exactly she had become invisible in her own life. When she stopped being a woman and became only a wife, when she traded her dreams for the security of a gilded cage. Down the hall, she heard Jason's low voice in the office. She didn't need the words to know who was on the other end. Sarah had become the main character in his life, and Karen had been demoted to a supporting role in her own story. But maybe she thought, as tears soaked the silk pillow, maybe there was still time to rewrite the ending. Maybe there was a strong, fearless woman buried under years of compliance and silence. A woman Sarah and even Jason would meet very soon. The days after the gala dragged by like thick, suffocating fog. Karen woke up, moved through routines, and watched her life from a distance like a spectator in a dull film about a woman who'd forgotten how to live. Breakfast alone, garden work, silent lunches, empty afternoons. Jason grew even more absent. Late nights, early mornings. When they crossed paths in the mansion's halls, they barely exchanged words. He was always on the phone, always in important meetings. Karen knew at least some of those meetings had Sarah's name, but she pretended not to notice, maintaining the facade of the compliant wife she'd perfected over the years. It was on one of those empty mornings that Karen made the first decision that would change everything. She stood in the mansion's library, an elegant room she rarely used, surrounded by mahogany shelves lined with books that served more as decor than reading. Her eyes landed on her business degree, framed on the wall like a forgotten trophy. Stanford. Honors. Once upon a time, she had been one of the sharpest students in her program. She had dreams, ambition, plans. And then she married Jason, and as his career soared, hers quietly evaporated. It was easier to become his wife than to keep becoming herself. Marta, she called. The housekeeper appeared, quickly attentive. Yes, ma'am. Could you bring me my laptop? It's in the office in the cabinet. Of course. Can I ask what you need it for? Karen paused, the word forming like a new muscle learning to move. I'm going to research careers, job opportunities. Marta's face brightened in genuine delight. That's wonderful. I've always thought there was so much potential in you that went unused. When the laptop arrived, Karen spent hours online reading, learning, updating her understanding of the market, reopening the door she'd locked years ago. It hurt to realize how out of date she was, how many doors had closed quietly while she stood still. But it was also freeing. For the first time in years, she was doing something for herself, making a decision that didn't revolve around Jason, wasn't meant to please him, wasn't shaped by his needs. Over the next days, she built a secret routine. In the mornings after Jason left, she studied online courses, business news, industry shifts. She updated her LinkedIn, abandoned for years like an old house no one visited. In the afternoons, she tended the garden. But now she saw it differently. Not just a pastime, a possibility, a skill, a door. One afternoon, while she worked among the orchids in the greenhouse, Mark arrived for his weekly visit. But this time Karen saw him with different eyes, not just as a kind man who cared for her plants, but as someone who ran a business. Because that's what she discovered when she finally asked. I actually own my own landscaping company, he said, a little shy. I do high-end residential properties in Atherton and the surrounding area. Your place is one of my favorites. Why? Because you actually understand plants, he smiled. Most clients just want a yard that looks expensive so they can impress neighbors. He looked at her steadily. You really love it. Something stirred in Karen's chest. Mark, she said, voice careful. Can I ask a strange question? Sure. Do you think someone like me, business background, could work in this world? Professionally, I mean. Landscaping, floral design, something real. Mark stopped trimming a rose bush and studied her with renewed interest. Karen, you have natural talent. You have technical knowledge most people in this field don't have. He hesitated, and she pressed softly. And you have something you can't learn in school. With love for it, he said simply. Love for nature. That's rare, and it matters. That night, for the first time in weeks, Karen ate dinner alone without feeling abandoned. She felt energized. Possibilities hummed in her blood. When Jason came home at 11, she barely lifted her eyes from a botany book. Working late again, she asked, not expecting an answer. Meeting with international investors. You know how it is. I do, she said, and returned to the page. Jason paused, surprised by her lack of interest, but he didn't push. He was used to her questions, her concern, her careful attention to his world. Now, she simply didn't care. And something in that unsettled him. Karen's shift was gradual, but steady. She started waking earlier to study before Jason left. She wore practical clothes during the day. Jeans, sneakers, t-shirts instead of delicate dresses and heels chosen in case he came home unexpectedly. Marta noticed and silently supported her. She left fruit and energy drinks in the room where Karen worked. She even offered contacts. My niece works for an event planning company, Marta said one day. They always need floral vendors and natural decor. If you want, I can introduce you. That would be incredible, Karen said, and meant it. Through Marta's niece, Karen met Helen Price, 35, an event planner who'd built a solid business serving Northern California's wealthiest clients. Helen was everything Karen quietly admired: independent, successful, confident, still elegant, still feminine, but never small. "I've heard good things about you," Helen said, over coffee in Palo Alto. "Marta says you have a gift with plants. I'm just starting to think about doing it professionally," Karen admitted. "It's always been a hobby. The best professionals start that way," Helen said, with passion. She leaned forward. "Can I see your work?" Karen had prepared a folder photos of the gardens arrangements she'd made for the house experimental creations. Helen flipped through them slowly, her expression changing as she went. "Karen, this is exceptional," she said, genuinely impressed. "You have an eye color texture composition." She pointed to a photo of the orchids. "And this is art." Karen's throat tightened. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." Helen tapped the folder once. "Listen, I have a proposal. In 2 weeks I'm doing a major event, a client's 50th birthday. Very demanding." She smiled. "Theme is Secret Garden. How about you do the floral decor with me as a test run?" Karen's heart kicked hard. "Are you serious?" "Completely," Helen said. "Paid partnership, and if it goes well, we talk about something more permanent." Driving home, Karen felt like she was floating. For the first time in years, she had something of her own, a project born from her initiative built by her hands. When she walked into the mansion, Jason was in his office as always. But instead of feeling rejected, she felt oddly grateful. His absence gave her space. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up from his screen, productive, Karen said. And for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't lying. Jason lifted his head, startled by the tone, by the certainty. But Karen was already walking away. She had work to do, plans to make, a future to build. That night, instead of lying in bed waiting for a husband who might not come home, Karen stayed up sketching ideas for Helen's event. She researched vendors, calculated costs, built timelines. She felt alive in a way she'd forgotten was possible. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Karen worked with a focus that surprised even her, dividing her time between research planning and hands-on preparation. Mark offered to help with technical execution, and together they developed arrangements that looked like living sculptures. "Are you sure you've never done this professionally?" Mark asked, staring at an intricate piece Karen made with orchid succulents and moss. "Never," Karen said, smiling. "But sometimes you don't know what you can do until someone finally challenges you." Mark hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Can I tell you something?" "Sure, you've changed," he said. "In the last few weeks, you look more like you, if that makes sense." It made perfect sense. For the first time in years, she was living for herself instead of existing as an extension of someone else. The day of the event arrived. Karen woke with nerves and excitement she hadn't felt since college presentations back before her life became polished silence. Jason left early for another important meeting, barely noticing Karen was leaving earlier than usual, too. "Good luck," Marta said, hugging her with maternal warmth. "I know you'll be amazing." The event was at a mansion in Hillsborough. When Karen arrived with her small team, Mark and 2 assistants, Helen was already there managing other vendors. "Kara, so glad you're here," Helen said, eyes bright. "I can't wait to see your magic." The next hours were intense. Karen worked like she never had before, hands shaping arrangements, eyes catching every imbalance, mind solving logistics in real time. She was sweaty, dirt under her nails, hair pinned up messily, and she felt radiant. When the final decor was complete, Helen stared. Breath caught. "My God," she whispered. "Karen, this is magic." The mansion looked transformed. Orchid cascades hung from ceiling beams. Centerpieces turned tables into living paintings. Hanging gardens created intimate pockets of romance. Soft lighting revealed texture and color like a secret being told gently. The birthday woman touched a floral arch and blinked hard. "It's better than I imagined," she said. "It's perfect." During the party, people approached Karen again and again, asking questions, wanting cards, offering future projects. She felt like Cinderella at the ball, except this time she didn't need a prince. She was her own fairy godmother. As the night wrapped, Helen pulled her aside. "We need to talk officially," Helen said. Karen's pulse jumped. "About what I want to offer you a partnership," Helen said simply. "You have exceptional talent. I have clients who need exactly what you do. Together we could build something really special in luxury events. A partnership A company, financial independence, professional fulfillment, everything Karen had surrendered when she decided being just a wife was enough. I need to think, Karen said, breathless. Of course, Helen replied. Just don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't come every day. On the drive home, Karen sat in silence, processing what she'd become in a single day. The woman who left the mansion that morning wasn't the same woman returning at night. She found Jason in the garden unusual. He was on the phone pacing between the roses she'd planted. No, Sarah, you don't understand, he said, irritated. It's not that simple. I need more time to organize things properly. Karen stopped. More plans about her life made without her. But this time, instead of pain, she felt a strange distance, like she was watching someone else's story. Jason saw her and ended the call quickly. Karen, you're late. Where were you? Working, she said. Working? Jason looked genuinely confused. On what Karen met his eyes calm. On myself. She walked past him into the house without another word, and Jason stood among the roses, stunned by a wife he suddenly didn't recognize. Karen didn't confront Jason that night. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the pearls against the wall or rip the red dress from the hanger. She lay awake instead, listening to the low murmur of his voice behind the closed office door. Each word a reminder that something fundamental had already ended. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, something else quietly began. The days that followed the gala blurred together. Mornings arrived whether she was ready or not. Sunlight filtered through glass and money and silence. Karen moved through the mansion like a visitor present, polite, invisible. Breakfast alone, garden work, long, empty afternoons. Jason became even more distant. He left before sunrise, returned after dark. And when their paths crossed, the exchanges were brief, efficient, emotionless. He was always on the phone, always in meetings. Karen didn't need confirmation to know that at least some of those meetings answered to the name Sarah. She said nothing. She watched. She waited. One morning, standing in the mansion's library, a room designed more for display than use, Karen stopped in front of a framed diploma she hadn't looked at in years. Business administration, Stanford, honors. Once she had been exceptional, ambitious, certain. She remembered late nights fueled by coffee and certainty, presentations delivered without fear, the belief that she would build something meaningful with her own hands. Somewhere along the way, she had decided that loving Jason meant shrinking herself. And she had done it so gradually, she barely noticed the cost. Marta, she called. The housekeeper appeared instantly as always. Yes, ma'am? Could you bring me my laptop? It's in Jason's office cabinet. Marta hesitated, curious. Of course. May I ask what for? Karen felt the word settle in her chest before she spoke it. Work. Marta smiled, not politely but proudly. I've been waiting to hear that, she said. Karen spent that entire day online, reading, studying, updating her understanding of a world she had stepped out of quietly years before. Job listings, market reports, industry shifts. Her LinkedIn profile stared back at her like an abandoned house, outdated, forgotten, but still standing. The realization hurt. How much she had missed, how many doors had closed without a sound, but it also did something else. It woke her up. A routine formed in secret. After Jason left in the mornings, Karen studied. Courses, articles, case studies. In the afternoon, she went back to the garden, but now she looked at it differently. Not as escape, as skill, as possibility. That perspective sharpened the next time Mark arrived. She watched him work with professional focus, asked questions she'd never thought to ask before. How long have you been doing this? About 10 years, he said. I own the company, high-end residential mostly. She blinked. You own it? He smiled, a little embarrassed. Yeah, I just prefer the hands-on work. Why do you like working here? She asked. Because you actually understand what you're doing, Mark said without hesitation. Most people just want something expensive looking. You care. Karen hesitated, then asked the question that had been circling her mind. Could someone like me do this professionally? Mark looked at her fully now. You already are, he said. You just haven't claimed it yet. That night, Karen didn't wait up. She read. She planned. She slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Jason came home late. She barely noticed. Change followed quietly. She woke earlier, dressed practically, stopped performing for an audience that wasn't watching anyway. Marta noticed and supported her without comment, fresh fruit left on her desk, quiet encouragement and small gestures. One afternoon, Marta mentioned a niece who worked in luxury event planning. They're always looking for floral designers, she said casually. Karen's pulse jumped. Would you introduce us? Marta smiled. With pleasure. That introduction changed everything. Helen Price met Karen for coffee in Palo Alto, confident, sharp, unapologetically successful. She flipped through Karen's portfolio slowly, carefully. This isn't hobby work, Helen said. This is vision. Karen swallowed. I have an event in 2 weeks, Helen continued. Theme is Secret Garden, 50 guests, high expectations. She met Karen's eyes. Do it with me. 2 weeks later, Karen stood ankle-deep in flowers, directing placement-solving problems, creating something alive. She didn't check her phone, didn't think about Jason, didn't wonder where she stood. She simply worked. And when the event ended, applause followed, not the loud kind, but the kind that matters. People asking who did this, who created that, who she was. Helen pulled her aside at the end of the night. I want a partnership, she said. You have talent, I have infrastructure. Together we can build something serious. Karen's heart raced. She didn't answer right away, but she already knew. When she got home that night, Jason barely looked up. How was your day? He asked. Transformative, Karen said. And for once, she didn't explain. The shift unsettled him. She wasn't always available. She missed social obligations. She stopped orbiting his schedule. One evening, he finally confronted her. This work thing, don't you think you're taking it too far? Karen looked up calmly. I'm just getting started. You don't need to work, he said. We're more than comfortable. It's not about money, she replied. It's about being someone. The words landed harder than she expected. Jason didn't understand them, and for the first time, Karen realized he never had. 2 months later, nature and art was real. An office, clients, revenue, independence. Karen woke before dawn and left before Jason stirred. She came home tired, dirty, alive, and Jason watched her become someone he could no longer control. Then came the call, the spring ball, 1,000 guests, 6 weeks, unforgiving expectations. Helen hesitated. Karen didn't. If I can rebuild myself, she said, I can build this. The night of the ball, Karen stood beneath a ceiling of cascading flowers. Her creations surrounded her. Gasps, cameras, admiration, and then she saw them. Jason and Sarah, hand in hand. Sarah's smile faltered when she saw the room. Jason went pale when he read the program. Creative direction. Karen Lewis. Karen approached them calmly. This is my event, she said. And in that moment, something shifted permanently. Later, Jason found her alone. I made a mistake, he said. Karen looked at him not with anger, but clarity. You made choices, she replied. So did I. There's no going back. That night, Karen left the ballroom without looking back. She didn't need to. Her life was already ahead of her. The transformation didn't announce itself. It didn't arrive with fireworks or speeches or dramatic exits. It moved quietly like roots pushing through soil, unseen until the ground begins to shift. Karen's days filled quickly. Meetings, site visits, design drafts, negotiations. Her calendar, once empty and ornamental, now dictated her life. And for the first time, she welcomed that discipline. Nature and art grew faster than either she or Helen expected. Word traveled quickly in the world of luxury events. Clients didn't just want flowers. They wanted atmosphere. They wanted emotion. They wanted what Karen knew how to create instinctively. Jason noticed the distance widening. She wasn't home when he expected. She didn't ask about his meetings. She didn't wait. And that unsettled him more than any argument ever could. One night he tried again. We need to talk, he said, standing in the doorway of what had become her workspace. Karen didn't look up from her laptop. You have 5 minutes. That's exactly the problem, he snapped. Everything is scheduled. Everything is work. She finally met his eyes. This is what purpose looks like, she said. It's inconvenient. It takes space. And where do I fit? He asked. Karen considered the question carefully. You fit where you've always been, she said. At the center of your own life. Silence followed. Jason didn't know how to argue with someone who was no longer asking for permission. The divorce conversation came sooner than expected. Not dramatic, not cruel, just inevitable. Jason sat across from her one evening, hands folded, voice careful. I think we both know this is over. Karen nodded. Yes. He waited for resistance, for tears, for bargaining. None came. I'll have my lawyer contact yours, he said. I already have one, Karen replied calmly. That surprised him. The legal process unfolded efficiently. Karen didn't approach it emotionally. She approached it strategically. And that difference changed everything. Her attorney was thorough, prepared, unimpressed by intimidation, and Karen walked into every meeting informed, steady, unafraid. Jason struggled with that. He had expected compliance, gratitude, acceptance. Instead, he found boundaries. While contracts dissolved, Karen built, projects stacked, revenue climbed. Her name began circulating independently of Jason's. She was no longer introduced as anyone's wife. She was introduced as the woman behind the work. Then came the Copacabana Palace wedding. 3 days, oceanfront, international guests, a test designed to break most teams. Karen didn't hesitate. She led 6 people across state lines, managed chaos, solved problems before they reached panic. She slept 4 hours a night and never missed a detail. When the ceremony unfolded at sunset, framed by tropical blooms and golden light, Karen stood back and watched her vision breathe. This wasn't survival. This was mastery. The praise was immediate. Photographers requested permission. Guests asked for cards. A magazine editor asked for a meeting. On the flight home, Karen watched clouds pass beneath her and felt something unfamiliar. Peace. She arrived home to noise, laughter, music. Jason was hosting a gathering, and Sarah was there. This time the sight didn't hurt. It clarified. Karen greeted them politely. Sarah studied her with open curiosity. "You're different," Sarah said later, unable to hide it. Karen smiled. Yes. That night, Karen slept without dreams. The next morning, she moved out of the master bedroom, not in anger, in alignment. The guest room became her sanctuary. Boxes appeared, files, plants, a life rearranged intentionally. 3 weeks later, Karen rented a small apartment in the city. Not an escape, an expansion. The separation agreement moved forward. Jason pushed back. Karen held firm. Half was half, not because she needed it, because she deserved it. When Jason protested, Karen didn't raise her voice. She raised her expectations. Meanwhile, nature and art exploded. Bookings doubled, then tripled. Staff were hired, systems implemented. Karen didn't just create beauty, she built structure. The magazine feature hit quietly at first, then loudly. Phones rang, emails flooded. Karen's story became something larger than her. Jason didn't like the attention. "You exposed me," he accused. Karen shook her head. "No, I stopped hiding." The spring ball arrived. 1,000 guests, 6 weeks of work, one night to define everything. Karen stood in the transformed ballroom as the first guests entered. Gasps echoed. Cameras flashed. Her work spoke before she ever did. And then Jason and Sarah arrived, hand in hand, confident, until they weren't. The program told the truth. Creative director Karen Lewis. Recognition shifted something fundamental, not just in them, in everyone watching. When Sarah confronted her later, Karen didn't defend herself. She didn't need to. She had already answered every question with her life. By midnight, Karen's calendar was full for a year. By morning, her future was no longer hypothetical. She left the ballroom quietly, not because she was small, because she didn't need applause anymore. Her story had crossed the point of return, and it wasn't finished yet. The conversation happened on a quiet Friday night. No raised voices, no shattered glass, just truth finally allowed into the room. Jason sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, rehearsed, calm, barely holding. "Karen, we need to talk." She nodded, already seated across from him. "I know." He spoke carefully, as if choosing the wrong word might detonate something. "I think we both know our marriage ended a long time ago." Karen listened, didn't interrupt, didn't defend. She simply let the silence do its work. "I'm planning to file for divorce," he said at last. She met his eyes steady. "I accept," she replied, "but not on the terms you're expecting." That unsettled him. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm no longer the woman who will quietly disappear for your convenience." Her voice wasn't sharp. It didn't need to be. The negotiations were swift and brutal only in their clarity. Karen's attorney didn't posture. He documented, prepared, anticipated every argument before it was spoken. Jason protested. He minimized. He reframed. Karen stayed still. Half was half, not out of vengeance, out of equity. And when it was over, Jason realized too late that he had underestimated her one final time. The night of the spring ball arrived like a reckoning disguised as celebration. The ballroom glowed. Suspended gardens cascaded from the ceiling. Light moved like breath through leaves and petals. Karen stood in the center of it all. Not hidden, not introduced, not ornamental. Present, recognized. When Jason and Sarah entered together, their confidence dissolved at the doorway. The program said everything. Creative direction, Karen Lewis. Sarah's confusion sharpened into disbelief. This is her, Jason said nothing. Karen approached them calmly, not to confront, to conclude. Good evening, she said, gracious. I'm glad you could come. Sarah searched her face. The woman before her did not match the story she'd been told. Later, Jason found Karen alone. I was wrong, he said quietly. Karen considered him. I know. I didn't see you. No, she agreed. You didn't. Is there any chance? No, she said gently. That was the end. By the end of the night, investors waited. Contracts hovered. Invitations crossed oceans. Karen declined nothing. She also chased nothing. She let the future come to her. Outside, beneath the quiet hum of the city, Helen waited with a bottle of champagne. To us, she said. Karen smiled. To becoming. 3 months later, Nature and Art opened its first international office. 6 months later, Karen stood on magazine covers. A year later, millions listened to her speak about reinvention. But none of that mattered as much as this moment, standing alone, unafraid, whole. This wasn't a story about revenge or betrayal or even success. It was a story about what happens when someone stops asking to be chosen. So the question isn't what Karen did next. The question is, what would you do if the life you were living suddenly made room for the one you were meant to become?